It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. Welcome back to Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill, and it's been a while since, no, we've had a guest recently, Coach Talia, but I feel like we haven't had a guest outside of our expertise, if you will. This is a client, Katie, that's with us today. She's been with us for a while, but I'm not going to tell her story for her, but Jess is going to give an intro about kind of how this episode came about. So The Biggest Loser is a hot topic right now with the new Netflix documentary. And this client that's with us today gave us a little bit of her perspective. And I think it is super valuable to kind of hear her perspective and her opinion of how she felt about The Biggest Loser back in the day, which I'll say I grew up in a household that watched those episodes religiously with my parents. Obviously, I didn't really understand the context as much at the time, but we just want to get into what is our personal opinions on this Netflix documentary, the perspective. Obviously, I think the documentary was a little bit, I told Jess, I'm like, it was kind of all over the place. I felt like I couldn't keep up. I don't really know what the intention was behind it, if it was just to reveal everyone's opinions. It was skewed one way, and then it seemed like it was skewed another. So I'm going to let Jess give an intro to Katie, since this is her direct one-on-one client currently. And then Katie's going to share some of her story, which I think you guys are going to love.
Yeah. So, okay. I started watching the series, the Fit for TV series on Netflix. And within the opening scene, I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. I texted Jill and I said, we have to do a podcast episode about this. Go watch it. And the reason I got so excited was because that first scene, I forget the gentleman's name, but he was like the biggest, the one who had lost the most weight of all time. And his statement was basically like, I'm an expert at this. I'm the best person at weight loss. That's like, I'm wonderful at it. And then they zoomed out and he said, well, look at me now. Like, basically I gained it back. So clearly there was something I was missing. Right. So my trainer brain was all excited. Like, they're going to talk about metabolic adaptation and like the healthier way to do it and build muscle and eat nutrients. And then it totally took a turn, and it was very much so, more so about like the lack of ethics of making good television, despite putting people through horrendous things that they knew were detrimental to their health. So anyway, Jill and I had already been planning on recording an episode about this topic. And then Katie had texted me, and a couple of our other clients also reached out like, did you guys see this? And we were just texting back and forth. And she had mentioned that she, at the time, used to watch this for motivation, as a lot of people did. So I wanted to invite her on so that it is also the opinion of somebody and perspective of somebody looking at this as weight loss motivation, not looking at it and giving just the trainer perspective. We wanted to be able to give all angles and perspectives and feedback. And then Katie also is coming from this place of, well, now I kind of look at it differently than I looked at weight loss versus health improvements back then. So part of this is going to be a little bit of our review and our take on that series. And then another part of this is really Katie telling her story. And I guess just like things that you've learned along the way, because I feel like there's been there's ups and downs for every single person. Because every person's life is different and life seasons are different and we go through things. So we'll kind of get into that, and that is whatever you feel comfortable sharing. But I think you're very inspiring as a person. So yeah, that's that. I guess go ahead, Katie, take it away. Do you want to? I guess we can start with the Biggest Loser piece if we want, and we can kind of go into that, and then we'll spin off and talk more about your personal story if you're comfortable sharing.
Sure. So, long-time listener, first-time caller. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the podcast. I now listen to it usually in the mornings when I'm walking. I wish that there were more episodes. So thank you both. But yeah, I remember in high school really enjoying The Biggest Loser. Like Jill, I watched it with my family, and I come from a family where, every diet under the sun was tried. And in high school, I actually was a member of Weight Watchers and attempting to lose weight even at that age. So I think my perspective is coming from, like, I would have been an ideal candidate for Biggest Loser, because usually who they chose to be on the show were people who were morbidly obese, and had been so for the majority of their lives. And that's really defines me. So I came into this world 10 pounds, 13 ounces, went home in 3 to 6 months of clothing. So I was plus size from birth. But back then, I would watch it and you would see all these people have, they'd be upset and crying in the gym, kicked out of the gym. And then the trainers would go up to them and they'd reveal, like, oh, I've been really struggling with this. And they would make it seem like, okay, now that person's healed and they're going to go back into the gym and they're going to really work hard and be super successful. And then you saw week after week dropping 10, 14, 12 pounds every single week. And eventually they would lose essentially half of their body in 6 to 9 months. And it seemed ideal, especially, from my perspective of someone who has been significantly overweight the majority of my life. You want that outcome as quick as possible. And listening to the documentary, what I thought at first, I was just like morbidly curious about it. But then as I watched it, it started to actually make me feel sad because I remembered enjoying the documentary. And so many of the contestants that they had on the documentary were talking about how they were desperate and just needed to, be healthier. And in the end, these desperate attempts to become healthy actually probably made them worse off than where they started. And they noted there was no real therapist meeting with these people. So the trainers having these big breakthroughs was just for TV. It wasn't actually helping them process through what they needed to be able to maintain those changes. And I truly think that when you get to a point where you are 300, 400 pounds, it's not just because you like food. There is something else going on, and you're coping in that way for some reason. And so I think it's just a shame that when I look back, watching the finales, celebrating that winner, that I was so excited in that time. And now as an adult, and now having gone through, way more journey-wise for my health, to see I was celebrating something really harmful and just how terrible that was collectively for America to say, hey, this person's thin now. They're accepted. Let's champion it. We don't care what happens to them when the show ends. And so that was, why I was texting Jesse, where I was like, you guys have to do a podcast on this, because essentially what happened on that show is the antithesis of how Jesse trains. And from, I've been now being trained by Jesse for a little over 2 years. And it's not the real world. And I know these people signed up for a television show, but I think that, if I look back when I was young, if I had joined one of those shows, I would have been really naive. I would have been sold on, you're going to be thin at the end of this, and not fully understood the long-term ramifications. So
the other thing
those are my initial thoughts on the show
that I thought was interesting, which I didn't remember as a kid, even that this was how it was run, but this ranch that they all just abandoned life. And I'm like, this is kind of like a circus that we're all just watching these little things in this bubble. And I was like, this is actually awful the way that this was set up. And obviously that part, when I watched it back, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize they weren't just at home living life. This is way worse than I even remember when I was watching this documentary. So that was interesting to come up. And then not to mention, like you said, the real life component. Who could not lose weight when they're in a controlled environment? That defeats the whole purpose of what we do, right? We want to integrate it into your real life. So yeah, it was super interesting. And actually I told Jess before you hopped on this morning that I was like, shoot, I was trying to find my messages from 2+ years ago when we first talked, because I remember, and obviously we can kind of I know we'll hop back and forth between Biggest Loser and your story, but back when we talked, I remember there was definitely a hesitation. I think you were doing something else, if I remember, and you were like, nope, not a good fit right now. And then we came back and reconnected later. I don't know if I'm sure you remember. I was like, gosh, what was she doing before?
So I was back to Weight Watchers. So it was one of those interesting things where I had done it in high school and I'd done it on and off throughout my adult life. I'm 39 now, just for context of how many decades we can add up. But even though social media has so many harms, I found Jill on TikTok one day. And I guess, sorry to splice some of the personal story. I had reached my highest recorded adult weight. I, for whatever reason, decided to get on the scale on New Year's Eve in 2023. And when I got on the scale, I was heartbroken. It was the highest I'd ever been. And, I felt a lot of shame and so forth. And so I was like, I'm going to rejoin Weight Watchers. I would usually join Weight Watchers, lose 50 pounds, and then gain 70 pounds after leaving because I was making changes in the moment, but not long-term changes. And then as soon as I stopped, I'd gain it back. So I had joined Weight Watchers and was having some success. And I had found Jill's TikTok. And at that time, I had started researching more about nutrition and fitness and the importance of protein, all these things. And Jill's TikTok was talking about the, some items, and I thought it was interesting. And I went and researched behind the back, and I was like, whoa, I think that this woman is right. I think that this aligns with what I'm thinking. And so it took me a bit to work up the courage to schedule a call. I scheduled a call, and I have to say that in that call, one of the questions was like, why now? Like, why would you want to do something now? And without going into real details, but my husband and I went through an infertility struggle that resulted in no child. And that's when, through that grief and so forth, is when I put on a lot of the weight. And I remember I had said to Jill, this is one of the reasons I've not reached my heaviest. And I've had this realization that it's just my husband and I want to live a long life with him. And I'm worried that if I keep going down this road. And the first thing that Jill actually said was she showed, appropriate sympathy for my loss of not having children, which most women do not acknowledge, or they just glaze over. And so initially I just instantly was like, wow, she's very, emotionally in tune or mature or whatever you want to say. But we had the whole spiel, and then she sent me the price sheet. And I remember talking to my husband about it, and he was like, well, maybe we should see if you can be consistent with these improvements for a bit of time. And then if you're listening and you're interested and you haven't joined already, they have a free Facebook group. And from that Facebook group, they do occasional trainings. And Jesse had a training on like gym form techniques. And you might not remember this, Jesse, but I signed up and attended. So I then attended.
Oh, I mean, I remember the workshop, but I don't recall knowing you on that workshop.
Yeah. So, I just signed up, did that workshop. And then after the workshop, I attempted in my own home to put together a workout. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so then I contacted Jill back and was like, actually, never mind. Can I join? And then I was randomly paired with Jesse. So that's the long-winded version, I guess.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. No, I love hearing this perspective. Also, can we talk about your husband? Well, I won't give his name. Her husband is now also a client and working on his health.
And he's been with you for a while too, Jess, right?
Super supportive, which is rare. I just want to give a little shout out there too. It's so cool to have spouse pair supporting each other so much.
I know, I wish we could do that with everyone. Honestly, I feel like it's so powerful to have you guys both going through the same process and knowing that the two of you aren't always aligned either. So you might have a good week and he might have a shit one and vice versa, right? That's the point, is that you guys, obviously you can have a supportive spouse without them being in the program, of course, but just a different.
But it's just turned into a very special thing. So there were so many things. I'm taking notes as you're talking because I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish we had 2 hours. One thing that you had touched on that I think is really important is it's not a willpower thing. If you could just willpower it away, you wouldn't have this weight struggle that you've struggled with your whole life, right? So I think some of what the trainers were doing of, well, now we're going to work through this. Okay, good. Now go get back in the gym. It's like you're playing this game of tug of war with willpower versus creating systems to make choices a little bit easier based on whatever your roadblock is, because every single person is different. But also the support team and the medical support that you have around you. You are working with other specialists to work through the emotional piece of some of the eating patterns. You are working with a really excellent endocrinologist. You're working with a team. So it's not us as your trainer saying, all right, this is the end all be all. You'd better just go lift weights. It's like, well, yeah, lifting weights and learning to add nutrients and the habit change of that is a huge piece. and you're also doing these other things together. So I think like looking at the whole person is such an important component, especially when it comes to people who have struggled with being overweight their whole lives, right? We work with a broad spectrum of women, and some undereat chronically and under restrict. So, but I think there is often that in both cases, there's different mental reasons that
like patterns. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's an important thing about like seeking help for your whole person, not just for the physical.
I also wanted to point out, you said your husband said, let's see if you can be consistent first. And it's very interesting because I have that conversation so many times a day. And I actually had a woman this week was saying like, well, life is crazy. Like I have to see if I can even stick to this. And I was like, just to give you perspective, that's like you telling me that you need to make money before you get a job. Like
that's the purpose.
We're literally, that's our whole purpose, is to help you see that through and find a sustainable way for you to do that. So anyway,
also, sorry, I'm jumping around here, but Jill pointed out like they go and they live on this ranch where they don't have any real life scenarios that they have to encounter. A lot of what you're saying, Katie, that you're like, whoa, I can't believe that 15 pounds a week isn't like, I can't believe I used to think that was a realistic weight loss goal, right? We talk to women like this every single day that we're still unwinding those belief patterns, because there's millions and millions of women this show is one example, but there's tons of right now it's still happening on the internet. People post their Optivia or Ozempic results before and afters. And, I lost 30 pounds in a month and a half. You can too. And it's like accentuating these unhealthy expectations. We have a lot of women who come to us and they ask for, well, I only want it if you provide meal plans. And that's always our answer is, okay, well, we could provide you a meal plan and you probably would lose weight. But then what happens after, right? Like that's like putting you on the ranch and saying, here's the perfect environment, go ahead. Okay, but then what happens when you go back to your real life and you want to have like cake on your birthday or like you don't know how to navigate these social situations when there's food in front of you or when you're having a stressful evening and that was your coping mechanism, right? Like, so a lot of what we do is working through the messy with our clients, because if you can learn to navigate the hard life seasons, anybody can do it on the super motivated perfect weeks, but like how often do those come around, right? Like that's not realistic or sustainable. So a lot of our process, our clients' process, all of them look different because every person's life is different, but it's messy. It's ups and downs. It is not consistent progress every single week, but there's consistent inputs. So over the course of time, those outcomes and results and life changes are accumulating without them feeling like it's some major revelation.
And obviously this is a podcast, so you can't see me, but I'm still an individual where, through the help of Fueled and whatnot, I had lost about 80 pounds, but I still have like 100 pounds more to lose. So it's like, this is a really long journey for me. But Jessie, when you're talking about like the ranch, it's sort of interesting because I almost feel like my first year with you was almost like I was on the ranch. Because when you first join something, you're super motivated and you're there. Mm-hmm. And it was just my husband and I. And while I have a very busy job, he has a busy job, and we had hectic schedules, our lives were our own. And I could calendar out, we're going to go to the gym. And so, Jessie can attest, my first year with Fueled, I was incredibly consistent.
Katie is a type A perfectionist. She is somebody who is going to do the homework and be the best student. And I'm like, Katie, you don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, but this was the problem is that I was so perfect, like I was living on the ranch, and I tracked every day, although I was given and this is the other thing with it being slow. I'm a picky eater, and I was used to not eating, making the best choices for me for long-term health. And you have to almost do it in stages. You can't just completely wipe everything that you know away. And so that first year, I made a lot of changes, but still a lot of protein bars, a lot of protein shakes, but making my consistent gym visits. Then as we approach year 2, while I've been with Jessie, I had a major career job shift. And then overnight, I ended up having a relative move in who's a teenager. So I went from having this perfect ranch-like environment to then having a teenager in my home where now it's shuttling around, it's crazy, and I wasn't able to consistently make the gym. And similar to what the contestants on Biggest Loser experienced, and I've done some research on this, and if you have a lot of weight to lose, medically, regain is extremely common and almost natural because your body is used to being a certain size and it will almost fight against you if you start to lose weight. You have this, push and pull. And so that first time after I had the relative move in with me, having this new teenager, I actually kind of went completely off the rails. I started not tracking. I wasn't consistently going to the gym anymore. I was checking in with Jessie, but it was constantly like, I know Jessie, I know I'm off the rails, but this and that. And she really stuck with me through the life season. There was actually one point where I texted her and was like, you know what? I don't think that this is working for me anymore. Perhaps I should part ways, give my 30-day notice or whatever. And Jessie responded, she was like, that's fine, but let's meet and have a plan. So that way, when you're on your own, it will be okay. And during that period of time, I was like, I don't have a plan. I'm just gonna, go into the wind. And I immediately was like, no, I take it all back. I need to work through this. But I think that it's probably similar. I was on the ranch, and then when faced with real struggle, I realized that in the perfect scenario, in the perfect systems, I can apply what I'm taught. But when real life comes and smacks you in the face, if you haven't actually changed your habits and worked on your underlying issues, you will still default to those coping mechanisms. And that's what happened to me. So I actually regained some weight from last August to December of the year. And it was kind of up, gain, lose, kind of all over the place. And then I was able to bring it back in, like Jessie said, with my team of medical professionals and the great, Jill and Jess to help me on my way, really get back on track and learn. And so I know in other, I apologize for talking too much, but in other podcast episodes I've listened to, it's really been emphasized that they will give you the tools that you need. But if you don't want to do certain things, as long as you're aware that those are the outcomes, your expectations. And Jessie and I have had a lot of conversations that lately I no longer care about the scale. I'm at a point where I am focusing more on being a healthier individual, and those habits will then eventually, the side effect will that the scale will go down. And so that's sort of where I've come in life of, yes, I've lost a lot of weight and I still have so much more to go, but people really need to work on it. And that's, I wasn't on The Biggest Loser, but from that documentary, watching the individuals, the majority of them featured had regained weight. And I think it's for similar reasons. In that perfect ideal scenario and for money, you could do all of this and follow the plan. But without really addressing your issues and working on it and truly building healthy habits, you're just going to revert to the person you always were, in my opinion.
And the healthy habits are like, it's for you texting me one day and being like, can you believe this? I just packed cucumbers for lunch because I wanted them. Like, this is just part of my life now. I just made I put avocado on something. I feel like I remember the first time you tried avocado and like
that's amazing.
Raspberries or something, like some sort of fruit or berry or something. And you're like, oh, this has high fiber. And then you're like, oh, I think I actually like this food. I thought I was picky and I didn't like it, but I do like it. And now adding colors, and you call your different components to each meal with your protein and your different colors and your different, is just part of what you do. Like, that's how you pack your lunch every day. And it's, again, even when we were working together for the first several months, you would have never done something like that. And that this is just the person you are, even through the now a tough, I don't want to say a tough life season. You've adjusted very well to being a caretaker and having this promotion and all these things now. Even on the not so great weeks, you're going to the gym once a week consistently, no matter what, right? Like, that's now become just a norm of something that you do. There's all of these little things that are now just part of your regular life that are healthy inputs that add up over time, even when our focus is, let's just become healthier, not weight loss. Like you said, that becomes a side effect because all these inputs and choices are now part of your life. They're not something you feel like you're having to like jump through hoops to do every day.
And I think a lot of people, like I know I was afraid when I had my consultation with Jill, is I flat out asked her, have you worked with not just overweight people, but obese people, like someone as overweight as me? And she didn't bat an eye. She was like, yeah, we've worked with everyone. And I thought that was funny in the documentary. Bob, the trainer, was like, I've never worked with overweight people. And it's like, oh, how can you possibly train someone if you have no background in it at all? That shocked me.
Well, it's just like okay, I always play devil's advocate for everything. And part of me before watching this thought like, well, they must not have known better. Like at the time, they must have thought they're helping people, right? Because that's why every trainer gets into this industry, right? Because we want to help people. And I'm thinking of my own career progression, thinking like, well, I definitely didn't. I didn't approach things the way that I do now with muscle building phases and times not dieting when I was training in my earlier days of training, right? The fact that they know what they know now and they seemed so nonchalant, like pained me to watch. And even, I don't know, even the doctor on there being like, well, had I known, then I would have shut it down. It's like, you were on the show for all these years watching all this dysfunction happen. Like, I don't know. Again, as a community of professionals, I feel like trainers are much more educated now on metabolic adaptation and like doing things in a healthier, non-extreme way. But I don't understand how you can be a part of that and know what you know now and still speak the way that they were speaking as if there was nothing wrong with it. Like that to me was gut wrenching.
Yeah.
So,
No, I agree.
I also liked that they taught, and I kind of touched on this a little bit. At the end, they kind of touched on Ozempic a little bit, or GLP-1 agonists, and I thought that was interesting. And we've had plenty of episodes about this of like, okay, like weight loss in itself isn't the problem, right? Like the way you go about it is the problem. And it's the same thing with the way that people are abusing or overusing GLP-1 agonists. It's like, no, the problem is the speed at which you're doing it, the fact that you're not eating enough protein or nourishing your body, the fact that you're not learning how to keep it off. You're going to rely on this thing and then
You haven't changed who you are at all.
Not changing your habits.
Yeah.
You're excited to see the scale drop quick. So instead of going to the gym, you just rely on this thing. And now you're also withering away your muscle tissue, which has health consequences. And again, it's not just the GLP-1s. Insert any fad diet, insert fasting, insert keto, it's like none of these things in themselves are the problem. The problem is when the root cause of, okay, we really need to change what's creating these behaviors isn't addressed. And also we're not learning to maintain or learning that, hey, after the weight loss, there's these things we have to keep doing, like lifting weights and eating protein and adding nutrients and going for walks. Like that stuff doesn't just stop because we've lost the weight, or else we're going to end up back in the scenario we were in before.
Yeah, I mean that's all of it. And the documentary was also frustrating because I feel like it was some of these people from the show sharing their real life experience and how much of a toll it took on them mentally. And then it was just the trainers and the doctors like defending themselves. And I was like, this show's over. Can't we just come out and call a spade a spade? Like, let's just say what this was. Why are we defending this at all at this point? But I remember the one guy, and of course, like we're getting such small little pieces in this quick documentary, but him saying like, hey, I think it would be really beneficial for you to like follow up with these people. And we're not all shocked that this was for TV and not actually for these individuals, right? Like, let's be real. It was entertaining. And I forget who said it. Maybe it was Bob, maybe it was the doctor saying like, yep, the next year was bigger. Then it was childhood obesity. Then it was like, how obese of a person can we find? So I'm like, they didn't give a shit. They just wanted to show this bigger transformation, bigger, because they were getting the attention. So anyway, obviously looking back, you know, as I was, whatever age I was at the time looking at it, I'm like, wow, this is like so amazing for these people, right? Like, and of course we have more knowledge and education on things now too. So when they showed the documentary, I was really frustrated with the ping ponging. And then I heard metabolic adaptation and I was like, wait, are they about to shift gears right now and give me what I want? And I was like, no, never mind.
No, they never went deep into that. They
I was
never
like,
went
are
deep
we
into
about
that.
to have a confession? Nope.
So we are in the middle of, we just filmed or just recorded a 3-part series about like, what does an actual healthy diet look like in terms of how much you can expect to lose per week? What does an actual healthy muscle building phase look like? And then what does actual healthy maintenance look like? Definitely listen to those episodes when you get a chance, because we kind of go into it. It's like, if you're really just losing body fat, maybe 1% of your body weight week over week is realistic. And which, again, for most people, that is a half a pound to like 2.5 pounds a week, is really realistic. And again, if you have more weight to lose, maybe you're losing 3 pounds a week, but it's most definitely never 10 pounds a week or anything like that. If that's the case, it's because you're starving yourself. You don't have physical food and nourishment in your belly. You're probably losing water weight from being dehydrated or from not having carbs in your system. So just unwind. We really want to try to use this platform to be able to unwind all of these unhealthy expectations, not just from this show, but that are still floating out there for all of these women across the country who don't know what real healthy maintenance looks like.
Yeah. And like with the show and what you just said, Jesse, is that it, and Jill mentioned, like, let's get the heaviest person we can find and all this stuff. They're targeting already emotionally fragile people. And not to generalize, I'm sure there are lots of people who are happy with their, they're happy in their own body, and that's great. But they specifically said they were looking for people who were overweight and unhappy. That's what they were targeting. So when you're overweight your whole life and you are bullied constantly, and society is telling you that you will be accepted once you are thin, and this show comes about, or you see these fad diets, a lot of it is you feel like you've tried everything and nothing has worked, and you're just desperate to get to the finish line. And, if anybody, I don't know what the listener base is. I would think it'd be a wide range of people on their journeys. If you are, listening and you are similar to me, where you have well over 100 pounds to lose, the real, it's painful to say, even for myself, the reality, but the slower you go, the better off you will be in the long run. If you lose weight quickly, you will likely have more regain statistically. That's a statistical fact. You will not have time to actually build and change your habits and learn. And so even though I have been with Fueled for 2 years and still have 100 pounds more to go, if this takes me 5 years, then guess what? Maybe I'll get to live longer from it. But it's not an overnight thing. And that's the harm, is I think that when you are suffering and you feel trapped, and I know I felt trapped. When I was at my heaviest weight, when I went to the airport, I brought my own seatbelt extenders with me because I would be too embarrassed to ask the flight attendants for that. I used to love roller coasters, couldn't run roller coasters. I'd go to restaurants and have to request tables because I was afraid, what if the booth was too small for me to fit in? My whole life had been altered by my size. And so these things are so appealing I'll just do this quick fix. And looking back, I'm so thankful that I stumbled upon that TikTok video of Jill's and gave.
Acting a fool.
No, I don't even know what you were doing, but it made sense to me. I researched it. It made logical. And while this is guaranteed, if you use Jill and Jess, it will not be a quick experience. It will be a very long journey. And the more weight you have to lose, the longer that journey will be. But even if when I first joined, I thought I'd be X size by now and I'm not there, it is amazing how much my life has transformed in this 2 years, like genuinely transformed. And so it just pains me rewatching that documentary and seeing how many vulnerable people were targeted and still today are being targeted. And just know that there are real solutions to help you. And even if you want to use a GLP-1, Jill and Jess, as you've heard, they're for it as long as you're the right candidate because of the muscle loss and all of that. So I don't know. The whole when I was texting Jesse, the whole reason why this happened is that I thought, I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting with the drama of Biggest Loser. And then in the end, I just felt really, really sad. And I feel so thankful now that I have the education to understand why that was so wrong. And yeah, I mean, it's just terrible. And just to end, end this thought with some irony again about the trainer. She said we didn't know any better. At one point, Bob, the trainer, says, well, doctors, they just like to play God. But then he talks about his heart attack and he says, if there hadn't been a doctor in the gym, I would have died. So it's very like, I think that this happens. You pick and choose what you want to hear, what you want to listen to. And there's no way, even in the early 2000s, that a trainer didn't realize that if you were exercising 9 hours a day on 800 calories, that it wouldn't be harmful and that you wouldn't have someone try to run a mile in sand, having not ever run, need to go be airlifted to a hospital. Like this seems
or the psychological ramifications of screaming at people and thinking that that's going to lead to them wanting to make healthy choices. Like what? You're creating an aversion against that. Cause yeah. Well, Katie, thank you so much I know this is stepping out of your comfort zone, me roping you into joining the podcast, but we really appreciate you. Thank you for sharing everything. I feel like, again, it hits differently when people can hear it from somebody who actually is going through what they're going through versus us saying, oh, well, this is what we do for a living. It's like, it's different when you hear somebody who's like, no, this actually is helpful, even though it's a slow pace, even though it's painfully slow at first, right? Like your life has changed and it's been really cool. Thank you for trusting us to be a little part of that journey. And thank you for sharing. This is awesome.
Well, thanks for having me.
I have one more question for you too.
Oh, sure.
So there's a lot of information on the internet these days, especially social media. I feel like people get whiplash as one video is like, do this. It's the only thing you need to do. And the next one's like, oh my God, don't do that. Do this. And you're like, which one? So I would love to hear, I guess, like, I don't know if it's like your perspective or just like being where you're at now, which I also appreciate that you're not, that like you're on this podcast putting this in air quotes, in the middle of your journey. Not that anyone's ever done, but like, you're like, okay, I've hit some goals, but I have lots more and things like that. So a lot of women are feeling skeptical. They're feeling afraid, or I don't really know truly, like, obviously there's always going to be fear of like, if I pay for this and doesn't work, generally speaking, like for anything in life, for any of us. But like, what would you, I don't know if you felt anything like that, I guess, back in the beginning of, obviously at some point when somebody signs up, they get to the point of like, well, what do I have to lose at this point? Right? Like I have to try something. But what do you think in your perspective keeps women in that spot of like, okay, this solution is being presented to me and it sounds like everything I need, but I'm not going to do it. What do you think is that hold up in their mind? Or maybe you had that in that little bit of your like limbo period.
So in my limbo period, I think it was mainly financial. And that was the thing, is that so many times in my life, I had dumped money into memberships that then I didn't actually use, And so when you obviously are hiring a personal coach, you're getting what you pay for. You're getting personalized service to you versus, when I was on Weight Watchers, you just inputted your height, gender, age, and it spit out numbers at you. So it wasn't really geared towards what underlying conditions do I have? What's my job like? What's my real life like? So I think for me, a lot of it was like, wow, this is a commitment to spend money. But then for me, after that conversation with my husband and whatnot, and, now he's joined as well. So he's, on board. But for me, it was sitting back and really thinking, what am I getting? What value am I really getting from this? Because when you look at, whatever the total, number is for the price, and I don't even know what the price is off the top of my head, but you look at it, you essentially are getting one-on-one support at almost any time of the day. I text Jessie and I get a response in a reasonable amount of time. Obviously, she has a life, and I don't expect like instantaneous. But I was at the gym yesterday and I couldn't do something. I texted her and I was like, I cannot do this. Like I have tried multiple times and it's at the point where I need to like scale back and get better at something else before I can move to this step. And she responded, so you're getting this personalized service. I get a weekly check-in every day where she reviews my meal logs. Every 5 weeks, I get brand new exercises, but she reviews, am I doing what I'm supposed to do at the gym? All of this stuff. So you're almost getting nutrition support, some emotional support, even though, I have an actual therapist, but some emotional support. Someone who can actually, it's like you're having a personal trainer and a nutritionist in your pocket. And so, yeah, it's a lot of money, but it's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all. And it's moving at my pace. And one of the things I love in the check-ins is I forget, which said it, maybe it was you, Jesse, about the trainer screaming at you. Like in the check-ins weekly, it even has a section where it says, how do you want me to respond this week? Compassionate understanding. More educational. Do you need tough love? And there are certain weeks where maybe a lot of times I default to the compassionate understanding, but sometimes
You are going through a lot in your life right now.
yeah, but sometimes I'm like, no, I would like some educational support on this. Here's my specific questions that I have. So I think that the hang up for a lot of people, especially my favorite phrase is in this economy is the price. But if you were like me, who has struggled your whole life, you have wasted money year over year on all sorts of junk that has not worked. And if you give it a go, and to be honest, because it's individualized towards you, the times where I have not, air quotes, succeeded of this plan is because I have not done what I have said I was going to do. I've broken promises to myself, and whatnot. But if you are honest and say, here's my goal and here's what I want to do, you'll get someone saying, okay, we can get you there if we do X, Y, and Z. Oh, you know what? I don't want to get rid of the processed foods. All right. Well, you don't have to get rid of them, but your time frame is going to change. You got to, pick and choose. So I think it's one of those things where, for me, this is a long-winded answer. Sorry, Jill.
This is the best answer. There again,
but that's what it would be, is you got to step back and say, hey, I'm telling you up front from a real person who's already been in this 2 years, it's going to take time, and people might take, everyone's journey is different. You might be quicker than me. I might be a snail, but I need to be with what's going on in my life for it to be real. Like, everyone's going to have their own journey. But if you're looking on TikTok and it's saying anything about fast, like not as in fasting, but quick, any guarantee of any sort, I think the pre-planned meals, like Jill and Jess, they'll give you guides of like things that will help you at the grocery store, better choices, perhaps, if you want to have ways to make it more colorful. But if you actually want to long-term change your eating habits and exercise habits, there is no quick fix. And it pains me to say that, because I really wish that I could find a genie in the bottle, get, $500 million and be a size, whatever. But that's not how life works. And so, Jill, I think a lot of people, it might be the financial. And unfortunately, if you are listening and looking up trainers and then hedging at the cost, you either join and rearrange what you're spending other money on and give it a go, or just keep doing what you're doing, because it's like you guys do such an excellent service. You deserve to be paid for what the service you're providing. And in my opinion, it has been worth it. And for me, I just, instead of spending all this money on DoorDash, I'm now putting it towards my long-term health. I'm just shifting where I'm spending my money. I didn't suddenly gain extra income.
Yeah.
It's just moving things around.
Start to value it differently as you get into it.
Yeah.
There's a couple things you just said of the weeks that I don't do well, it's because I didn't do what I said I was going to do. You never said because I didn't do what my coach told me to do. And I think that's a very big differentiation between there's a lot of bad coaches out there who are just, okay, client, well, if they're not doing what I say, then they're not going to get results. And that's really piss poor behavior change. That's not going to get somebody wanting and learning what their inputs versus their outcomes are. So I think that's a really important piece of what you just said, is that it's you are owning your journey. And Katie, for everybody who's listening, is an excellent client in the fact that she shows up even if it's a shitty week. If it's a week that she's like, you know what, stuff kind of hit the fan and here's what's going on. Okay, she still checks in and we come up with one or two small things that are doable for the next week. She travels for her work. Okay, during your travel, maybe our expectation isn't to get to the gym. Maybe it's to go for a walk each morning. But she's showing up so that we can set those small goals. I think when people don't see the value in our program, it's because they expect this overnight change and then they hide when things aren't going well. So they aren't getting the service they're paying for. They're buying something and they're letting it sit on a shelf and they're not using it. Or they show up to their check-ins, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, with no context. Like you share, hey, here's the roadblock that I'm struggling with this week. Then it allows me to provide better support and better tools for your specific situation. We do have some people who hire us and then we don't hear from them for a couple months, and it's like, oh, you are wasting your money, right? Like, so if you're making a big investment like this, use the service that you are paying for. And again, we have a community chat, we have all these resources and recipe books and this and that. The biggest value you are going to get is in those weekly check-ins with your coach. Show up to those, no matter how good, bad, hard of a week it was. Show up to that, because that, if you have a really good coach, it's our job to meet you where you are, regardless of how quote unquote good the week was. So if I can give anybody any guidance, or if there's anybody listening, like, I don't know if it was really worth it. Okay, how are you showing up week to week, you know?
Love it. Yeah, I'm glad that Katie, you, after you made me emotional, you kept talking, because it gave me a second, because I was like, if she stops talking and I have to take over right now, I think I'm going to need a second. So I'm so grateful for you sharing all of that. Truly, I mean, I knew that anything that you had to share about your journey would be valuable, but I think it's The Biggest Loser documentary, and all of that timing was a great correlation and segue, I guess, into you sharing your experience. And obviously, we love having you, and we're so excited that you're here with a client as a client, but we also really appreciate you taking the time today to share this with people, because I think there are a lot of people that need to hear what you had to say. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You're our first client ever. You're our first client.
I said, maybe you'll have me back when I'm farther along down my journey and people can see
Anytime.
how long it took. But
no, appreciate it so much. So thank you so much. I'm so excited to get this out into the world for everyone to listen to. But that is all for this episode, and we will see you guys next time.